In today's episode, we're going to be making some decadent red velvet truffles that are going to be perfect for Valentine's Day. This recipe does not use box cake. We're going to be making all of this homemade, but don't worry, it's still going to be extremely easy and of course, delicious. So let's get into it. Hello, mi gente, and welcome back to Nata Knows Best. I'm your host, Nata, and in today's episode, we're going to be making some red velvet decadent truffles. I wanted to make this as homemade as possible while also leaving some room for some semi-homemade ingredients. So I'm going to dive right in. For these red velvet truffles, we're going to start with our dry ingredients, and here is where we're going to make our homemade red velvet cake. So I'm going to start with some all-purpose flour along with some cornstarch. And to that mixture, I'm going to add some cocoa powder because for those who did not know, red velvet cake does include chocolate. And then we're also going to add some baking soda. Now that we've got our dry ingredients nice and incorporated, I'm going to set this aside and start working on our wet ingredients. Here I have some unsalted, softened butter. And to this, I'm going to add some sugar. As a reminder, if you guys are looking for the ingredients and instructions, all of that will be listed down below on my website, which is nataknowsbest.com. So I'm just creaming our butter and sugar. And you want to do this until the butter is light and fluffy. Okay, so our next step is to add our eggs. I'm going to add them one at a time. To our egg mixture, I'm going to add some whole milk. And I'm actually going to do a cool little trick for this recipe. So most red velvet cake recipes include buttermilk, but because I couldn't find buttermilk, I'm going to be using whole milk, and then I'm going to be adding some acid to it. So your choices are either adding some white vinegar or some lemon juice. Here I have some white vinegar. And this is going to create the same flavor and body that you would get from buttermilk. So go ahead and incorporate both of those ingredients together. And lastly, I'm going to add some red food coloring because what is red velvet cake without the color red? So I'm going to add about 2 teaspoons. But if you really want to be ambitious with your color, you can go up to 1 to 2 tablespoons. So it's up to preference. Once you have your wet and dry ingredients ready, it's time to incorporate them together. You obviously want to do this slowly so you can make sure that everything is evenly distributed. So I'm going to slowly add our dry ingredients first. While making a homemade red velvet cake may seem like it's not the easiest, I guarantee you these extra steps make all the difference in terms of flavor. Our final step is to add our cake batter into a greased baking dish, and you're going to bake this for 25 minutes. I'm obviously not going to bother spreading this out evenly just because once we bake this cake, we're then going to crumble it to create our truffles. So there's really no need for it to look perfect. All right, mi gente. So some time has passed and our red velvet cake is officially done baking. And the first thing I did was allow it to cool. And once it was semi-warm, I went ahead and grabbed whatever you would call this tool, or you could even use your hands. And I went ahead and crumbled our red velvet cake until I got to a semi-fine texture. And now I'm gonna go ahead and start creating our truffles. Now, I did say that there was going to be a semi-homemade component for ease. So instead of making cream cheese frosting from scratch, we're going to be using some store-bought cream cheese frosting. It's going to give it a lot of texture and a lot of sweetness. But again, it's going to be a little easier than making both components from scratch. So I'm going to start by adding just half and then mixing it with a spoon. Once you have the frosting semi-incorporated, you're gonna have to get messy and use your hands. So I'm going to kind of fold things in, almost like you would make dough. You start seeing everything form together You'll know that you achieved the perfect texture for your truffles when everything starts looking like a wet sand consistency and the color is more like a dull red, maybe like a light red. So now the next step is to form your truffles. So you can do this by hand or you can use an ice cream scooper. And the first thing I did was press the mixture inside the ice cream scooper. And now I'm just going to place it in my hand like a scoop of ice cream, and I'm going to form it into a nice round ball. These are going to be some larger truffles, but you can make them however big or small you like. I finished forming our red velvet truffles. As you guys can see, some of these are smaller in size, others are much larger. And the next step is just to place them in a freezer and allow them to chill for roughly 1 to 2 hours until they're fully solid. And I'm back. It's been a few hours and our truffles are nice and solid. So I'm gonna go ahead and start creating the coating that's gonna go on top of our truffles. So here I have some white chocolate that I've melted, and I'm gonna go ahead and add our truffle in there. Give it a nice coating, and then I'm just gonna place it. Here I have a variety of sprinkles. Of course, these are going to be Valentine's Day inspired truffles. So to keep with that theme, I'll go ahead and sprinkle some of this red on there. When it comes to decorating your truffles, my biggest suggestion would be to make sure you work quickly, because once that melted chocolate is on top and creating that coating, it sets pretty quickly. So I'm gonna have fun with all of my different types of sprinkle colors. I have different shapes, and you can find these at your local baking supply store. Of course, I couldn't let this video end without giving you guys a taste test. So here is one of the red velvet truffles, and it's a little wonky in shape, but I know the taste is gonna be amazing because we made our red velvet cake from scratch. So good. You can really see the even coating that we got on that truffle, and it is definitely nice and moist inside. It has a very soft, spongy texture, and the red velvet alone tastes incredible. So I highly recommend that you guys make this recipe for Valentine's Day or just for any other day. I will be linking this recipe down below in the description box. It'll also be posted on my website, which is of course notthatknowsbest.com. Stay tuned for next week for another delicious recipe. And as always, mi gente, thank you so much for watching Not That Knows Best.